Welcome to the Tough Talk Podcast, your weekly sports podcast rambling and debating all your favorite sports. Previews, recaps, predictions, and more. Only here at Tough Talk. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at Tough Talk Pod. Now, here are your hosts, Christian and Derrick.
Hey Christian, how's it going today?
Hey, how you doing? Welcome to Tough Talk, and another week in the books for sports. Looking forward to discussing all this week's topics with you.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and get right into it, shall we?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, last Sunday we got to see the Texans play the Raiders, and that was a really good game to watch. It was a lot of fun to watch. The thing I could definitely take away from this game was that the Raiders' defense looked way better in the first half than it did in the second half. In the second half, it just seemed like the defense could not stop Deshaun Watson. It was kind of crazy to watch. DeAndre Hopkins had quite a few catches last week. I was glad to still have him on my fantasy team for last week. What did you take away from this game? What was the big takeaway for you for this game?
I thought both quarterbacks played well. Both thrown for 3 touchdowns apiece. Deshaun Watson almost making 300 yards with 279, and Derek Carr, same thing, 285 for him. I really enjoyed that. I thought both quarterbacks looked good in their outings. I also really enjoyed the running game of Houston, and not only the running back itself. Deshaun Watson got at it a little bit. Like you said, they had a hard time stopping him. And I think that was ultimately what ended losing the game for Oakland. Deshaun Watson had about 50 yards rushing on top of his almost 300 yards passing, which is a little unlikely of him as a quarterback as he's slowly progressing into a more pocket present quarterback.
Last week, I discussed on our preview of this game that I really felt that they had to stop Deshaun Watson in his running game because that was the one thing that Oakland has always had a big issue with. And yet again, here it was prevailing. And as weird as this is going to sound, I'm a huge Oakland Raider fan. Watching this game, Deshaun Watson gets kicked in the face on the go-ahead touchdown. That actually was the game-winning touchdown. On one of the craziest plays I think I've ever seen in football of how he got kicked in the face. It was completely unintentional. There was no... And as a Raiders fan, I was sitting there more concerned with what that meant for Deshaun Watson at that very moment, because that could have been very well a detached retina or something very serious for Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. And he's a good young quarterback, and you'd never want to see an injury like that. So I found myself almost out of the game, and I wonder if maybe the Raiders defense found themselves out of the game at that point too, and the Raiders offense just did not come out and do well in the next drive.
Yeah, no, that's true. There definitely was some kind of miscommunication there, 100%. Other than everything else on that side, you hit the nail right on the head for the defensive side. The only thing really else I have to add for this game is it was nice having Tyrell Williams back. I know I'm hopping back over on the offensive side for Oakland, but I'm pretty sure Derek Carr really enjoyed having some kind of solid receiver back in the lineup. He almost went for 100 yards. But yeah, I think Oakland, they're on the right path to continue. I mean, they're in the hunt, as you could say. I don't know if they'll be a wild card team. I think they're slowly starting to fall behind, but I think that they'll be in the middle of the pack this year. And I think if they continue to do what they're doing and start building around these core players they have, they'll be okay. And Josh Jacobs was a fantastic first-round pick for them, and hopefully they can continue that in the draft next year.
And Tyrell Williams was actually the number 1 receiver for the Raiders before he went out this year. And when he came back in, he came right back in and came right back into that number 1 receiver form. And it was really nice to see that for the Oakland Raiders. That's a good sign for the offense going forward. And I'm hoping that we can see more of that coming forward in the next few weeks. All right, let's go ahead and get into that Packers-Chiefs game. And I got to be honest with you, Matt Moore looked way better than I thought he would. He actually kind of kept that offense cruising, and the Kansas City secondary looked really good against Aaron Rodgers, despite how many touchdowns they gave up, because they were getting coverage sacks on Aaron Rodgers, and that's a good thing to see from a secondary that you had a couple question marks going into this week. Because the pass rush, we knew it was there, but we didn't know if the actual secondary could get the coverage pass rush or coverage sacks like that, and we've seen a few of them this week.
Yeah, absolutely. The secondary of Kansas City was fantastic when they were when on their side of the ball. What really affected Kansas City was those running back dump offs to Aaron Jones, because Aaron Jones had a heyday. He had 159 yards receiving. He was 67 yards rushing. He had two touchdowns receiving from Aaron Rodgers. But other than that, there wasn't much that was deep down the field. The second highest receiver, other than Jones, only had 48 yards, and that was Jake Kumaro. So you're not really seeing a lot of help downfield for in the sake of the Packers. So good job on Kansas City for the secondary side when it comes to that, but they need to do a better job on covering the running backs, because that's what lost them the game.
I was about to say the other touchdown that Aaron Rodgers had was actually to another running back, and it was Williams. He actually had three passing touchdowns to running backs during this game. So yeah, that was the big issue, was the running backs out of the backfield. Like I said, it was a lot of coverage checks going on, and that was actually, that's something you want to see as a secondary. But when the linebacker can't cover the back, and then that's the big issue, that's going to be that's an Oakland Raider issue, and it's kind of surprising to see the Chiefs deal with that. Like I said, though, Matt Moore actually was able to keep the offensive rolling, was actually able to find Tyreek Hill a couple of times, was actually able to find Mecole Hardman. He was actually able to find a couple people and keep the offense rolling, which I'll be honest, I didn't see that coming from him, and it'd be interesting to see how he is going forward, because Mahomes is going to be out quite a few weeks with his knee, it looks like, because they're going to try to wait on him right now, especially if Matt Moore can keep you in games like that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really interested to see what happens with Mahomes, if he's going to continue to be out week after week, or when they decide to finally put him back in. When they do decide to put him back in, though, I think it's still going to be a few weeks till he's 100% form. So hopefully Matt Moore can win some of these games and not just keep them in the game while Mahomes is out, or we might not be talking about them as a first-round bye, maybe just a 3 or 4 seed. Because let's face it, there's not really anybody in the AFC West that's battling Kansas City right now for that division title.
They're also not going to be facing Aaron Rodgers each week, where Matt Moore has to compete with Aaron Rodgers each week. So that's another thing that they can look at going forward, too, as a possible win. So let's go ahead and get into the trade deadline. There was a couple of trades throughout the week. We had the Jalen Ramsey trade. We had the Marcus Peters trade. But the only real big trade that happened at the deadline, and I said dud, because it was a really disappointing trade deadline. Aqib Talib was the only guy, and he got shipped out of LA, and he went to Miami, and they were just kind of like, here, take our contract, because we need to re-sign Jalen Ramsey this offseason, and that's the more important factor for us. I really thought we would see Trent Williams move. I thought we maybe see Devontae Freeman moved. I thought we'd see a couple of these moves happen, and the really big ones that happened so far were just corners getting moved around. I mean, we did see Kenyon Drake go to Arizona, and I'll get into that here in a minute when we talk about the Cardinals-Niners game. But that wasn't considered a big move at the time of it being made, and I didn't see a lot of big moves being made at the trade deadline. It could actually be said that the biggest trade so far was the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade way earlier in the season for a first-round pick. I mean, Jalen Ramsey, yes, that's a big trade, but let's be honest here. We all knew he wanted out of town since the beginning of the season. When he started getting hurt and not showing up, we kind of knew that was coming from him. But I really do think the Minkah Fitzpatrick, and if you look at the way the Steelers' defense has played since acquiring Fitzpatrick, that's another reason I say it's one of the biggest trades this season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. The number one picks that went back to Miami for the players they traded over to Pittsburgh and then also to Houston are definitely the biggest trades so far we've seen this season. But as we talk about the deadline, yeah, there wasn't really much. Leonard Williams switched from the Jets to the Giants. That was probably something that interests me the most, because that's the first time ever in franchise history for both teams that they've made a trade with each other. Leonard Williams was a former first-round pick. He only gets traded to the crosstown rival for only a third and a fifth, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the actual only trade that happened was the Aqib Talib trade. Aqib Talib's on the IR, but Miami's obviously not competing, so this is something that they're going to try and hopefully build around, have Aqib Talib in their secondary for next year, and they didn't have to give up too much, so we'll see what happens there. Miami's really interesting in how they're trying to put their pieces around, and they're getting rid of a lot of players that you would want to have in your core. So, but the biggest thing, the number one disappointment for me out of the trade deadline was the Cincinnati Bengals. Hey, look, these guys are 0-8. They have a core that's been around for a long time, and they haven't been good for a couple of years now. They fired their coach, they moved on, and now they're in a bye this week, but now they're gonna bench Andy Dalton over the bye. But they didn't go ahead and try and ship him. They didn't try and ship AJ Green, Tyler Eifert, none of those guys. Nothing happened. Nothing moved by these guys, and that was surprising to me. I think that's a fall on the Cincinnati Bengals there. They could have got so much, or at least something, in compensation for these guys that obviously looks like they've gave up on.
I know in our preseason analytics, I said that I thought that this team was going to be really bad this year, and so far they're 0-8. And I also said I thought by week 4 or week 6 they would be benching Andy Dalton to go ahead and see what the rookie had. And it's taken all the way to week 8 for them to do it. And the messed up part about this is they did bench him on his birthday and let him know, hey, we're not trading you and we're going to bench you. That's a pretty messed up situation, but what are you going to do about it?
Absolutely, I agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and you can't hold anything personal. I do think it's a smart decision to go ahead and do it. Hey, you're 0-8. Obviously, you're not making the playoffs. Might as well see what the rookie can do. You're going to move on from Dalton. We all knew that was going to happen. But Andy Dalton hasn't played bad football. Let's all put that into perspective. If he decides that he wants to play another season somewhere, he could get a backup role or a role somewhere that might even have him compete for a starting job. I could see him becoming maybe like a Ryan Fitzpatrick style quarterback for the rest of his career, for however long that lasts, if he decides to continue, because he's 5th in passing right now. With the team that has been hurt, he hasn't had AJ Green the entire season and still found a way to be 5th in passing. That's impressive on an 0-8 squad. Now, granted, that means if you're down by a lot or you're down all the time, losing, you're going to pass more. But Andy Dalton hasn't been a terrible quarterback. So I know he's had bad reps in the past, but this season, although he hasn't won football games, he hasn't been bad throwing the football.
All right, so let's get into last night's 49er-Cardinals game. And I'll be honest, going into this game, we actually did a little segment on your Raw report for the Tough Talk Thursdays where we discussed this game, and I said I thought the Cardinals would lose 21-0 or 21-3. Man, was I wrong.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
The 49ers defense didn't look as impressive as I thought it was going to. Jimmy Garoppolo to Emmanuel Sanders is actually a lot of fun to see. Looks like a great trade for them. Kenyon Drake in his first game looked amazing. Looked like the guy that they may needed to trade for this time when David Johnson is down and Carson Edwards is down. It looks like the guy for the time being.
Yep.
There was multiple plays in this game tonight where I saw the Kyler Murray where I went, okay, that's why they chose him number 1 overall. I can actually see now why they chose him over number 1 overall. Because I've watched quite a few games of theirs this year, and he's kind of been mildly disappointing by the way. He has the indecisiveness in the pocket and will sometimes get himself sacked by kind of just almost doing circles in the pocket. This game, he was actually able to get outside of the pocket, make some big plays. There was a couple of those pro plays that you like to see, and I know that's a weird word because, hey, he's a pro quarterback. But I'm talking about that way he just put the touch on the ball over the defender's head. The one that really sticks out was the Isabella 88-yard pass that he had, where he literally just put it right over outstretched defender's hands, and it was an amazing catch to see. What my takeaway from this is I was more impressed with the Arizona Cardinals than I thought I would be out of this game. What do you think?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%, but I'm going to talk more about San Francisco as there's a reason that they're so undefeated. I'm talking about it all week over on my podcast, The Route Report, and these guys are legit. These guys are good, and this doesn't change anything for me for them being the number 1 team in the NFL in power rankings in my perspective. Jimmy Garoppolo is only putting himself in a better case for me as an elite quarterback. He's now 16-2 as a starter. He threw 4 touchdowns tonight. He went for 317 yards, no interceptions. Emmanuel Sanders, 9 targets, 117 yards. George Kittle, 8 targets, and he was almost at 100 yards, both of them with a touchdown. These guys are fantastic. Oh, and by the way, those 4 touchdowns by Garoppolo, all 4 different players. So he's moving the ball around. He's got a really nice running back game between Breedman and Coleman, although they only rushed about 100 yards total this week. which is usually about cut in half to the average. But when your average is 200 and you only get 100 and you're upset about that, hey, you still won the football game. I really like that. And look, I'm only talking about the offense here. We talk about the defense. 49ers defense is the best defense in the league. Now, they might take a step down when you go into stats and rankings because they did give up 24 points to the Cardinals. I'm sorry, 25 points to the Cardinals.
Yeah,
but they still got
conversion.
Right, but they still got 3 sacks. They had a nice pass deflection by Richard Sherman, but they did give up one really long pass during the game, 80-something yarder, and that was
yarder to Isabella I discussed.
88 yarder. Yeah, absolutely. But this defense is still great. This team is still great, and if you're doubting this team, then I think you got another thing coming. This is your NFC West champions. This might be your number 1 seed in the NFC. And when we're talking about this NFC West deciding a champion, that's not an easy task to do. They got the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams right on their backs. And Arizona, they might be 3-5-1, but they're a tough 3-5-1. We saw that tonight. Or actually, I'm sorry, we saw that last night, I should say.
If you're Jared Goff and Russell Wilson watching this game, and you're going into the meetings next week, and you're telling your coordinators, hey, look, when we're facing them, we need to try to get that. We can try to need to get a no huddle pace going against them, because when the Arizona Cardinals did that tonight, that defense looked shell shocked and looked a little confused. This is a defense that looks like it needs to set up, get prepared, and get everybody in the correct spots. And when they kind of set that tempo and went a little bit faster, this Niners defense looked a little different on that one possession. However, we only seen that one time tonight, but that's something to look forward to in the future for these elite quarterbacks that he's going to have to keep facing here in the NFC.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that that's probably not going to work for that much longer because this defense is so elite that they'll find a way to adjust pretty quickly.
But whoever in the plays next playing this week, I'm betting they're going to be having Jimmy G go no huddle all week against them just to get it through that they can stop it too.
Yeah, Jimmy G, scout quarterback, whoever it is. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, let's get into the Week 9 previews. The first game I want to talk about is the Chiefs and the Vikings. Matt Moore against another really good defense this week. We're going to have to see how this defense can hold up against all these offensive weapons that Kansas City does provide. Minnesota looking to set more records. We're actually looking to see if Stephon Diggs can go ahead and be the next Randy Moss for this team, because over the last 3 weeks he's set Randy Moss type numbers. Mm-hmm. Adam Thielen should be back this week and healthy. Dalvin Cook has been an amazing back for them this year. I still believe he's one of the top 5 backs, if not the number 1 back in the NFL right now. I'd have to look that up. But this team has looked really good, and I'm wondering how the Chiefs' defense is going to fare against them. And will we see Dalvin Cook getting a lot of catches out of the backfield from Kirk Cousins this week?
Yeah, I agree. When we talk about Dalvin Cook real quick, I would say he's number 2 overall running back. He is the leading rusher in the NFL. However, the added receiving intensity exclusiveness by Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers, to me, puts him as number 1 elite. But let's go back to the Vikings here. Kirk Cousins has not lost a game this season to anybody outside his division. So I know we just talked about how Matt Moore played well against the Packers, and he's not going to play Aaron Rodgers and the Packers every game, and hopefully he can get some wins. But hey, he's going right from the Packers to the Vikings, who have been probably the most red hot team in the last 3-4 weeks. Yeah, probably more than any other team in the NFL. Like they got it together. And now that they have Diggs on exactly what you just said, they've putting it together, and feeling if he comes back, Dalvin Cook stepping up. Both their tight ends have not really stepped up and did big roles, but they're both developing or doing their things with Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. when they need to. They're contributing when they need to. This offense is really dynamite.
All right, next one I want to talk about real quick, because I don't think it'll be much of a game. It'll be interesting to see. Will Chicago's defense finally come back against the Philadelphia Eagles this week? Philadelphia is coming off a huge win against Buffalo. What will we see out of this game? Who do you got as a winner? I think the Eagles take it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if that game against Buffalo was a turnaround for Philadelphia. I'm not sure, but however, that defense of Chicago is also tough. So they're going from a tough Buffalo defense to a tough Chicago defense. What happened with Philadelphia beating Buffalo was the run game. Wentz has not has not thrown for more than 200 yards in the last 4 or 5 games. So we'll see what happens if he can change that spectrum. But if the running game does not work for Philadelphia, then they're in big trouble.
All right, Pats Ravens. Can Earl Thomas and Marcus Peters get a pick from Tom Brady this week? Can the pressure get to Tom Brady and cause him to throw a rough interception? Or do the Pats go ahead and roll right through these Ravens? Also, Lamar Jackson, quite the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson is a great quarterback, and to me, this is the X factor for the entire game. Are we going to see Lamar Jackson that's had a lot of rushing yards, a lot of dynamite plays, or are we going to see the guy who throws some interceptions and picks, almost that rookie-like aspect of Lamar Jackson? He's still in his second year. What's he going to find the struggle zone? The coolest thing is that since 2011, the Baltimore Ravens have not lost a game. They're 10-0 in prime time at home, and they're at home this week. I'll tell you what, this is the first game that is going to really say, hey, is New England a team? They haven't really played a lot of tough games other than that Buffalo game, but that game loses a lot of structure because of that Philadelphia game that Buffalo just played last week. I could see New England losing this game. I can see Baltimore squeaking out an upset.
All right, Dallas, New York, Monday night. I think Zeke eats against this New York defense. I'm not quite sure. Daniel Jones, he's going to be in the spotlight. I think it's his first Monday Night Football game. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it is. It's going to be interesting to see how he can fare against this defense of Dallas. It'll be interesting to see if Van Der Esch comes back, and I'm just interested to see how he looks.
Yep, no, that's true, and this will be his first Monday Night Football game. He played a Thursday Night Football game against the Patriots.
Prime time was.
Yep. Hey, Zeke Elliott, he's right. He's probably going to eat. However, this Giants defense is really underrated in my opinion. They have a really strong young core, and let's see what happens with Leonard Williams if he decides to step in and play at all. But the Cowboys are 8-1 since 2018, since last season against their division. And they're not very good against everybody else, but they've only lost one game in the last 2 years against the division. I think that Dallas is going to be continuing to just dominate throughout this game in this division. They've played so well against teams this entire season when they play NFC rivals, so it's going to continue. They did really well against Philadelphia 2 weeks ago. I think it's going to be the same thing against New York.
All right, and then we have one more game I kind of just want to run over because we're probably like 5 minutes into this 3-minute segment here, but that's okay. Texans, Jags in England. I'm not going to get up to watch that game. It's going to be 8:30 in the morning here. I'm not getting up to watch that football game. I'll catch the highlights of that one. I feel like the Texans are going to be able to run away with this one. But then again, we've seen crazier things happen in the London game, so I don't know. Could we see some Minshew magic happen in London? We'll find out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll find out. And Jacksonville has had quite a nice record in London. They've won some good games. One of them was against my Buffalo Bills a few years back, unfortunately. But Deshaun Watson has not lost in his career against Jacksonville. He's 3-0 against his AFC South rival. And I don't think that's going to change this week. Houston's too explosive, too great of a team, and they have too much riding on their season as they're battling Indianapolis for that AFC South title.
All right, let's get into the fantasy follies and hopefuls. So for the guys who didn't do so great this week, I got 3 guys I'm going to talk about. One is the tight end, Zach Ertz, put up 2 points. T.Y. Hilton, 5 points. And DJ Moore, 3 points. I was going to bring up Kyler Murray and how bad his 12-point performance was last week, but he had 26 points tonight against a pretty daunting defense in San Francisco. So it'll be interesting to see how he does going forward. Anybody you got that didn't do so great on the DraftKings side of things?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a few. But the only thing I want to bring up is I just want to talk about Sam Darnold real quick. He had that really great game when he came back against Dallas, and then he's been really off in the last few weeks. If you had him on fantasy, there's someone better out there on the waiver wire, so go ahead and grab him. And then DraftKings, I'd be really careful with him. Although they're playing Miami this week, I'd be very careful at picking up this guy. Unless he's a really low salary bet and you can build around him, I'd be careful because he has not been great these last few weeks. And I think it's just not a good idea.
All right, real quick. He said that Sam Darnold, if you're having him, well, we have personally in our league, Jimmy Garoppolo is still available. He just had like 33 points tonight. So there is people out there. The other thing I wanted to discuss, because he said that Miami is playing the Jets this week, is Le'Veon Bell. I think he actually is set to have a good week this week because Miami has the second worst rushing defense in the entire league. DK Metcalf kind of had 2 touchdowns last week, but I think it was for like 16 yards. But it will still get you the points, and they're going against Tampa Bay this year, who's been a pretty decent defense, but they can't seem to stop the pass. It'll be interesting to see because most Tampa Bay games this year have been kind of like a gunfight, back and forth, super fast. So it'll be interesting to see how Seattle can fare against that. And I think DK Metcalf might be the guy instead of Tyler Lockett this week. Josh Allen could be a good start this week. Derek Carr could be a good start this week. Both of these guys are available in quite a few leagues on the waiver wire as well. I think Darren Waller against the Detroit Lions is going to be interesting because he's the number 1 receiver for the Oakland Raiders right now. But we also have Tyrell Williams back, so they'll be trying to focus on Williams, and I think that'll open up Waller again. Anybody you got?
Yep. Yeah, for the stack wise, I would put all my money into Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones, no matter how much it costs, and then build around them because those two stacked together against the Chargers this week. To me, that's just the best. If you're not doing that, then I think you're not going to do well. So hopefully no one else does it, so it's low percentage and ownership for you. But yeah, and if Devontae Adams comes back, you might be able to do maybe Rodgers and Adams or all three. Be careful when you're doing all three, but at least one or the other with Ross. And then also, I really like Russell Wilson with either Lockett or Metcalf. Now you say Metcalf, I think Lockett's going to have a good game too, but we'll see. Tampa Bay secondary not very good at all. I want to say Josh Allen, but I said Josh Allen last week, and he didn't do too hot. And Josh Allen has not been a 300-yard passer. The Buffalo Bills have not had a 300-yard passer since 2017 Tyrod Taylor. Or 2016 Tyrod Taylor. So when you look at that fantasy-wise, it just makes you wonder if it's worth the squeeze. Yeah, they are playing Washington, but I would be careful with that. If I had to pick up, I wouldn't be afraid to pick up maybe a John Brown or a Cole Beasley though. If I was you and needed a low salary receiver to fill your flex or fill your receiver number 2 or 3, no matter what you're playing in DraftKings or FanDuel.
Alrighty. So let's go ahead and get into the NBA and get into some surprising teams and surprising players that we've seen. I'm going to let you talk about it first real quick, and then I'll go ahead and fill in what I say.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 surprising teams by far, in my opinion, both come out of the East. And first I want to talk about the Detroit Pistons, and really just because I want to talk about 2 players. I want to talk about Andre Drummond, and I want to talk about Derrick Rose. Now, I talked about this a little bit when I was discussing it last week. We were discussing some teams, but it still continues to be the case. Now, Detroit's only 2-3, but as we know, it's only 5 games. It's a long season, so don't really worry about records here. But Derrick Rose has really found his place. Most improved player candidate, in my opinion, my perspective. I think that's going to continue throughout the entire season as long as he stays healthy. And obviously, we know that's been an issue in the past. That's why he's saying battling for a most improved or a comeback player of the year. And then Andre Drummond has looked fantastic in the paint, and he's without Blake Griffin at the moment. So I really want to pay attention to Andre Drummond for the next couple of weeks for when Griffin comes back to see if that'll still continue. And then the other team that I really want to discuss, and to me, this is probably the most exciting team in the East, and that is the Boston Celtics. I thought the Boston Celtics were not going to be that good. I thought they were overhyped this offseason, losing Kyrie Irving. They lost so much. And then they gained Kemba Walker. A lot of people thought that wasn't an increase in value. They thought it was just a filler. And then they re-signed Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward. They have a team, and they're very well-rounded. They play great defensive. I really enjoyed it. They just had a great game against the Milwaukee Bucks, who was first in the East last year, and they won by 11 points. Kemba Walker, 32 points. Jason Tatum looked fantastic in that game, played great ball off the screen, good transition play. His defense was phenomenal. So I really like where this team's going.
All right. The team I want to talk about is the Miami Heat. A lot of people like yourself had them doing decent this year. I didn't think it would be that great starting off, and I thought they might be in some trouble. However, what if I told you that they have a rookie on their team who's leading all rookies in scoring, and it's not Tyler Hero? a guy by the name of Kendrick Nunn, and he's leading all rookies in scoring right now. And Hero is averaging 16 himself. That's pretty
Wow.
impressive when you can get two rookies to average 35 points a game, because I'm pretty sure Kendrick Nunn is right around 19 points a game at this very moment. The other team I want to talk about is the Washington Wizards. I know this team is not a good team. I know it's not going to be a 8 seed even probably in the East this year. But what I want to talk about is Rui Hachimura is averaging 18 points and 7 rebounds a game. He's coming out looking like a true potential rookie of the year. And then we also have Isaac Bonga, who last year was getting no time with the Lakers. This year he's averaging 24 minutes, and in those 24 minutes he's putting up 6 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Now, while those numbers aren't mind-blowing, he's a 6'8 point guard that's 19 years old, and he's guarding people. He's guarding the number one player on the team. When James Harden was playing, that's who he was guarding, and he was staying in front of James Harden quite a bit. It was just one of the hottest nights that we've seen out of James Harden in quite some time. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I'm actually impressed with what I'm seeing out of the combination of Isaac Bonga and Rui Hachimura, and they have a few other players that have good length on that team. And they're also, Bradley Beal's on that team, so he's going to score a lot of points for you, like he did in the game against the Rockets that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I want to go ahead and oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I really like that Washington team. I think that's really cool that Rui Hachimura in his first ever game got a double-double. I just thought that's really cool. I just want to throw that in there. So go ahead and continue.
All right, so let's go to the fight. We had Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid. They got into it. Both of them have been suspended for 2 games. I'm going to let you talk about it for a minute, and then I'm going to discuss where I think the NFL or the NBA went wrong on this.
Sure. Yeah, I think it looked like a hockey fight to me, which I thought was really funny. Yeah, but it happened with 2 7-foot guys, and they looked like they were on ice skates because they just really didn't know what they were doing. So I found that quite funny. It was quite comical, but it's not a good place for the game. Some people like to say that hockey fights aren't good to the game, but in my opinion, that's a whole different concept. Basketball fights in hockey are actually implemented in the system in the game. It helps momentum. There's no place for fighting in a basketball game, and it looks bad. NBA already has a bad look, a black eye on what's going on with the whole Hong Kong China situation right now. The last thing they need is more things with fights and issues that are happening with their players on the court. So I don't enjoy that. I don't think that's a good look. The suspension of 2 games, in my opinion, I thought it was going to be a lot more. And that's not just because of the bias that I don't like the fighting in the game. I just really thought that it was just going to be a lot more just by just catching the feel on social media from some of the reporters that follow, like Woj, things like that. Just really thought that it was going to be more than 2 games, but it wasn't. So we'll see what happens. Thought there was going to be more implications that was going to really hurt the Sixers moving forward.
So the big issue that bugged me about all this is Ben Simmons didn't get a single game suspension for any of this, while he was the 3rd man in, which means he had to run across the court to get into it, and then was choking Karl Anthony Towns when Karl Anthony Towns was already restrained by other people of security staff. There was no reason for him to come in. There was no reason for him to be into that fight. I understand that that's your teammate and all that, but at the same time, you need to be smart enough to be at the other end of the court, not worrying about possibly getting a suspension for getting into a silly fight at the very beginning of the season. I believe all 3 players involved should have got way more than 2 games. I think Karl Anthony Towns, it's kind of interesting to see. I'm a big Minnesota fan, but at the same time, I think Karl Anthony Towns should have had at least 5 to 15 games for this encounter. I think it was a silly encounter. I think it should have never happened. And honestly, it kind of made me laugh when I watched it at first, until I seen Ben Simmons come in at it for no reason. But it made me laugh because it reminded me of Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, when those two went to fight that one time. And Charles threw the ball at Shaq, and then he tried to tackle him. Probably one of the funniest NBA fights of all time.
I forgot all about that.
And I forgot all about that. Yeah, and I thought the 2 big guys looking all awkward and clumsy, that's what it really reminded me of. And it was kind of funny in that sense. But at the same time, like you said, it is a shame for the game. And it's a shame for 2 of the best young centers in the NBA to be getting into this kind of encounter and showing players that that's what they're about. These 2 are showing a good fight, good hustle, but then you get into it with this silly encounter that should have never happened, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, the only plus side to this little scuffle or fight, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that they were both intense. Just like you said, they both are big name young centers that are probably going to be in this league for a very long time. So the fact that they're establishing and building this rivalry against each other for the future down the road, once we finally get over the talks of how this isn't good for the league, the suspensions are over, and we can move on from this, we're going to see a developed rivalry even more intense. And that's the only plus side to this fight that I will say moving forward.
All right, so the next thing we got to talk about is Kyrie Irving. Is Kyrie Irving a bad teammate to the rest of his team? So I'm going to go ahead and throw some numbers out there for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw 2 more numbers out there for you right after. Kyrie Irving is averaging the most points, most rebounds, and most assists in his entire career at 35 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. That seems like a really good stat. Kyrie Irving is also shooting 6 more shots a game this year, and his team is 1-3. Which side of the fence do you think of this? Do you like the 35, 6, and 6, or are you looking at the 1-3 and 6 more shots than any other year he's ever played?
Yeah, that's a really tough thing to say. I mean, he started off his Brooklyn career throwing down 50, but still lost the game, and he lost on isolation trying to be cocky and pretty. So it's tough. It's tough to say that. When the fact that you're only 5 games in and you're getting all these rumors that you could be attacked to the locker room, throws red flags up to me. When the fact that you have to have Kevin Durant go on ESPN First Take and talk about how Kyrie is not a toxic and defend him on ESPN, which happened on Thursday morning, or I'm sorry, not Thursday morning, was that Wednesday? No, that was Thursday. Sorry about that. Yesterday. Yeah, it was on one of those days on ESPN about Kevin Durant defending him already, and we're only 2 weeks into the season. It's an issue. But is he toxic to the team? It's hard to tell because it's just, like I said, it's so early. When you talk about his shooting, the fact that he's shooting more, I think that all comes down to the fact that if they win games. It doesn't matter if they put the W on the board. Doesn't matter at all. Because we've had this talk for years about Kobe Bryant. There was times that Kobe Bryant would go 8 for 27 or something like that, but they'd still win by 12. And no one would bat an eye. But as soon as they started becoming that team, he started getting older and they started falling out of that playoff race. But just about the time that you had OKC come out and about when Westbrook and Harden and Durant were there, that kind of time. That's when you started hearing things about Kobe Bryant talking about his shooting percentage. Why is he shooting so much? Is he a toxic to the team? Blah, blah, blah. Same kind of concept. But in this case with Kyrie, I'll have to say I'm going to hold tight on that for now, but it's still in the back of my mind for sure.
The small sample size raises a lot of questions about, 1, the shooting, 2, the teammate chemistry, and 3, what the record's going to be by the time that they get to the All-Star break this year. It raises a lot of questions. Who is saying he's toxic in the locker room too? That raises a lot of questions too, because there's somebody in that locker room who's saying that, who's the source. So
and you're right. And I think that, and I think that Brooklyn is is not in it to win it this year. I think they're not all in it, and I think we know that, the fact that because Kevin Durant's not there. So the record at the All-Star break will mean a lot, just as to see what.
Okay, give me just a minute. I actually just lost Christian here. Alright, sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty, but we're back.
Hey, how you doing?
We're talking about the Kyrie situation, but we're going to go ahead and move on. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the injuries that have been going on in the NBA. And there's been a lot of them happening. Did we just lose you again?
No, I'm here.
Okay, I can hear you, but we're losing video from time to time here, so this will be fun. All right.
All right, whatever.
So let's move on to the injuries that have been going on. I'm going to go ahead and start off by talking about Stephen Curry's broken hand. They say he's going to be out till at least December 1st, and they're not sure how far because of what you're talking about with the MRI and how that's going to come back and how that's going to look. It's going to be kind of scary to see how all that happens. Another point guard that's went out already this year is Trae Young. Luckily, he only rolled his ankle, so he'll be out, fortunately, for just maybe a couple of days to a couple of weeks. There's a lot of injuries going on, though. Any that stand out to you that you want to talk about? Because I got a few big men I want to talk about here after a minute, too.
Yeah, absolutely. You take over, but I just want to talk. The one thing is Steph Curry for sure. And when we talk about Steph Curry, his broken hand, who knows how serious it is? It could be weeks, could be months, could be All-Star break after that. But like the Zion Williamson injury that we discussed last week, I say the same thing. Don't rush this guy back because Golden State looks awful right now. Their defense looks atrocious, and that's something that we have not ever seen before. Golden State was in the NBA Finals last year, and they look like a team they'll be battling for maybe a top three pick in the draft this year. Like, that's how bad they look. So I wouldn't rush him back at all. I would just continue to just make sure he's healthy for next year. So have Clay and him. So right now we're sitting at two teams between the Brooklyn Nets and the Golden State Warriors who are already planning next year because of injuries, because of Durant and Curry and Klay Thompson. And to be honest, both those teams are intertwined because of the injury too. Golden State had to send a first-round pick over to get that D'Angelo Russell and had to the sign and trade for the Kevin Durant, but that pick was top 20 protected. So don't think that Brooklyn will be getting that first-round pick this year because Golden State will not be anything higher than 20. They will have their draft pick this year.
It'll be pretty interesting to see how Golden State looks next year, and it's unfortunate that we already have to consider them out of the playoffs at this point. But I think that's a fair assumption at this point too, because if they lose Steph Curry for even 2 months, it's atrocious to the team, and it won't help any. The guys I really want to talk about though are Derrick Favors. As though the Pelicans team isn't facing enough with Zion being out. Now Derrick Favors is out as well. It's going to be interesting to see how they can come back from that. And speaking about Zion with a big young man and seeing how they're going to be this year, the other guy that we already seen a little bit of and we wanted to see more of this year was Marvin Bagley, and his finger has already made him out for the next couple of weeks. So it's unfortunate that we've seen so many injuries in the NBA and we're not even a full week into the season yet. It's going to be crazy to see how this season goes, and I'm sure we'll be talking about many more injuries and many people coming back from injuries and looking really good when they do. And that's the thing I'm hoping forward to the most, is seeing like Zion come back and put up a double-double in his first game as well, like Rui Hachimura was as fortunate to do. So let's go ahead and move on to the Houston Rockets. And I want to talk about Russell Westbrook averaging 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists. And then you got James Harden averaging 37 points, 4 rebounds, and 9 assists. And it seems like they're complementing each other well, but again, we're only 1 week into the season. We've seen James Harden already have a 59-point game. That was the game we were kind of just pointing to earlier against Bradley Beal and the Washington Wizards. This team looks like they could go pretty well, but are we going to see this team get toxic against each other and then all of a sudden just implode? That's the real question mark with this. It's the two of the biggest divas in the NBA. How are they going to work together?
Yeah, I think that social media has blown this one a little out of perspective, in my opinion. I think they're just fine. I think that they were having great conversations, and then they showed a heated argument they had on the court in one of the first games, and like Bleacher Report and things were tweeting it out that they're already going after each other. I think that's just the intensity and both the fact that they're competitive. I think that they just both want to be that good, and they want to make sure that they're both being good and on the same page. So I'm not really worried about that yet. If anything else happens, then we can discuss this again in that context. But as of right now, hey, they're winning games. They're winning games big. They're looking good. 59 points, triple-double for Russell Westbrook. I always do that, by the way.
Me too.
And they look fantastic. So I really like what Houston's doing here. It was a bold trade when they went and got him. So far, it looks like it's panning out.
So the problem I had at the beginning of the season with this, and I'm still going to have, and I'm going to have to see what happens, is when James Harden left Oklahoma City, and he was asked about why he left Oklahoma City, he said there wasn't enough ball to go around. And a lot of people led that to believe that he was talking about Russell Westbrook. But maybe, just maybe, he was actually talking about Kevin Durant and didn't think that him and Kevin Durant and Russ together were a good three. Maybe they thought Kevin was taking too many ISOs in Oklahoma City, and maybe that's why they are now coming back together in Houston with a really good cast around them too. Because we got to talk about people like Clint Capella, who is just a great player on the team. They have a lot of pieces on that team that's going to be interesting to see how they are going forward. I don't think personally they're going to implode, like you said. I think a lot of this is blown out of proportion. But at the same time, it could be just that one play away from they don't want to be on the court together, and all of a sudden we have one of them trying to six-man for half the game, and the other one's in half the game too. That did happen in Oklahoma City, and it could happen here too, and it's really, you just got to kind of take it for what it is, I guess, at this point, because like I said, it's such a small sample size of the season. But we got to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, then we're kind of ignoring it.
Yep, I agree. I don't think that's the case. I feel like if that was a situation or a problem that was happening in OKC when they were together, they wouldn't have agreed to rejoin or reunite again in Houston. So I think it's going to be fine moving forward. As I said earlier, I think this was blown out of proportion. But if something else happens, I'm open to change my opinion on this.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into the World Series. It came all the way down to Game 7.
Yeah.
Washington Nationals got their first ever World Series. It's the second time in the city's history, but the first time for this franchise. And I got to say, it was really good to see. And it was a really entertaining Game 7. Max Scherzer, it's almost like a story, is what we keep referring to it. It's almost like a movie, because Max Scherzer was scratched for Game 5. It looked like he may not be able to see the rubber for the rest of the series. And then he gets a shot, gets worked out by the therapist, and he's starting Game 7. He did give up 2 runs, but I'll tell you what, that the Rendon home run is what started everything. And then Howie Kendrick hitting that 2-run shot off of the pole. I thought at first it was maybe going foul, and then it hit right off the metal, just to let you know where it was at. This was probably one of the more entertaining series. And when, like I said, when we look back 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to call this one of the best postseason runs by the Washington Nationals that we've seen in some time, since probably the 2011 Cardinals kind of thing, where they just had so much momentum going into the postseason. This is what that team reminded me of a lot.
I loved this World Series, and for good reason, obviously. I really enjoyed it. I got to follow them throughout their playoff run, and it was a hell of a run. There's no doubt about that. So I agree with you 100% that 10, 20, 30, honestly, for the rest of my life, I'll be looking back at this World Series and understanding how great of a run it was. This was a fantastic win for the city of Washington, D.C. People are now saying is the District of Champions, which I think is really cool, because the Mystics, the Valor, Capitals, and now the Nationals have all won championships in the last 2 years. Don't worry, Washington Redskins, you'll probably never make it. But I really like where they're at right now for the national squad. Now they have a lot of issues to worry about come free agency, and one of them is actually their MVP, and that's Steven Strasburg. He has the opportunity to opt out and not stay with the squad. I don't know if that's going to be the case though. Hopefully he stays around. And on the other one is Anthony Rendon, what you just talked about. You know, that homer that he had in Game 7 could possibly be the last home run that he ever hits in Washington. He's going to get paid big wherever he goes, but obviously, I'd like personal bias. I'd love to have him stay in Washington. But a hell of a series, hell of a game, hell of a way to end baseball. And we're only 160 days away from opening day. So don't sit back too tight, because 160 days is going to sneak right up on you.
So one thing I want to talk about real quick, because we only got about 10 seconds left, is Steven Strasburg. I actually follow Jack Flaherty on Facebook because of course I do, or on Twitter because of course I do. And after the game, right after he got MVP, he said 100,000% Strasburg opts out now. And the reason he said that is actually pretty smart, because this guy can go out there and get a max contract from any club right now as the MVP of the World Series. However, I think you're right, because I think he's going to stick in Washington.
Yeah,
I think he loves playing for the Nationals.
Yep. It's a lot of semantics, but it is also a lot of money too. Right now, if he doesn't opt out for the next 4 years, he'll be making $100 million, so about $25 million per year. If he hits the max contract, he's going to be looking at probably breaking records, which will probably be in the $34 to $35 million a year. So if he wants to make an extra $10 million a year and go pitch somewhere else, he can go do it. But if he wants to stay in Washington and continue that legacy that he's been his entire career, then he can go ahead and do that and still make a lot of money. So it all depends what kind of player Strasburg wants to be and wants to end his legacy with. But yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the next couple of days we're really going to find out what's going to happen with this.
Okay, so one more thing I want to talk about this World Series was the way that Garrett Cole looked when he walked off the field. He looked as though he should have been in that game in the seventh inning, and I kind of agree with the
Yep.
idea that he should have. And I wonder if this is the last time we're going to see Garrett Cole in a Houston Texan or Houston Astros uniform. I kind of wonder where he's going to go in this free agency, but we're going to have to talk about free agency on another one because we could sit here and talk about that for a good half hour itself, I'm pretty sure. But as far as this episode goes, this is going to be the end of this episode. But next week, we're going to be starting off a new segment. It's going to be called On the Ice with Christian. We're going to be where Christian here is going to be discussing all the news in the NHL for you guys. And where he's going to go ahead and discuss that himself. That's going to be a new weekly segment. I hope you guys are entertained by the idea of that. But I think that's going to be the end of this episode. And anything else you want to add, Christian?
No, just real quick to add to that, Garrett Cole. I don't know if you saw at the end of they had the post game interview. They came up and talked to him in the locker room, and he was fuming. And when they tried to talk to him about Houston Astros stuff, he said, "quote I am not employed any longer by the Houston Astros," end quote. Mainly because he was a free agent, but he was mad. And I don't think we will ever see him in a Houston Astros uniform again. And I think the fact that him not being in Game 7 really changed that. But he might have already had his mind made up. Once Garrett Cole is going to get paid too. He's going into free agency at the best age that you could possibly can for a pitcher. It's the prime spot at 29. So yeah, Garrett Cole's going to get paid too. But yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to doing the On the Ice NHL for the weekly thing. I love hockey. Now that baseball season's over, I can finally get more into it. So yeah, I'll be talking about that once a week on every Friday. And obviously I'll be talking more about other sports on the Row Report too. And you can catch Derrick with me on the Row Report every Thursday as we discuss some topics and get ready for having the show with you guys every Friday night.
I was just about to say I'll see you next Thursday for the Tough Talk Thursday clip, and then we'll get into the actual Tough Talk podcast on Friday night. But I think
Absolutely.
that's going to be it for this week, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys later.
Take it easy.
Thanks for listening to the Tough Talk podcast. Be sure to tune in every Friday as we break down all the major sports topics for the week. Don't forget to subscribe and follow on Twitter at Tough Talk Pod.